through the skies over Gaza late on Tuesday. But missiles fired from there were intercepted by Israel's defense system. Israel says it responded with targeted strikes. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says they will continue as long as it takes to restore security, and they're having success. I've received reviews of our many attacks against Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They received blows they did not expect. I have no doubt that we set them back many years. Israel says it's targeting leaders of the militant Hamas movement that governs Gaza and a system of tunnels used to move weapons. But continued Israeli airstrikes on Gaza are fueling a humanitarian crisis. Most of the dead in Gaza are civilians, and thousands of people are cut off from clean water and have no access to medicines. Hospitals, already struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic, are stretched to their limits. Efforts are now in overdrive at the United Nations to try and find a diplomatic solution to the crisis. France has drafted a Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire. But there is disagreement among Council nations on the best way forward. The Palestinian ambassador to the UN is demanding action.
This is what we are talking about. The Security Council is a shameful act of not even expressing a unified position calling for the end of this aggression.
But as long as rockets are still being fired from both sides, an end to the conflict is nowhere in sight.
And for more, let's cross straight to DW correspondent Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. Hi, Tanya, thanks for joining us. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that the airstrikes on Gaza have, quote, taken Hamas back many years. And yet he's pressing on with the offensive. Why and for how much longer?
Well, this is the question also that's being asked here in Israel. But I mean, this is for his domestic audience. There is some criticism of the military campaign, but all by and large, there is a political consensus that this campaign, military operation against Hamas and Gaza, should continue, and that there should be some serious achievement before Israel should stop its air bombardments. The discussion here is also moving now, of course, towards, what kind of achievement Israel would like to see, and what kind of arrangement there will be, and how, of course, this military campaign will be stopped. Everybody here is aware that Hamas and also Gaza will not go away, so they have to come to some kind of arrangement. And also there's the question, after the firing stops, how this will be implemented.
Now, for days, we have been talking about international efforts to end the fighting. Are we any closer to a ceasefire agreement?
Well, we understand that there are a lot of efforts within the international community, but also here, Egypt, Qatar, the United Nations are trying to engage and to mediate the parties. So we know mediation efforts are underway, and we understand that Egypt has proposed some kind of tahdir. That's a concept of a humanitarian quietening down for now. We don't know for when, possibly for Thursday. But again, last night there were also reports in the media here that some kind of ceasefire should have started on Thursday, possibly Thursday morning. It was almost immediately denied by both sides, but that's also not a surprise. We've seen that also in previous rounds of conflict, so we have to wait and see whether at some point both sides will stop the fighting.
Now, all of this talking is going on. Of course, the human suffering continues. What can you tell us about the situation in Gaza? So according to the UN, almost 60,000 Palestinians have been displaced in the territory.
Yeah, and this number is expected to rise because the bombardment continues, and people have been seeking shelter in UN schools because they think it's a bit safer for them to be there. Some had their houses damaged, and also a couple of thousands had their houses destroyed in airstrikes. So UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinian refugees in Gaza, is accommodating those people, trying to tend to their needs. But of course, they are all kind of concerns now. Also, for example, the coronavirus pandemic, Gaza had seen very high rates of infection before this round of hostilities broke out. So there's concern about health among health officials because people are now in very close proximity. But for many people in Gaza, they have to make a choice between being rather safe, and there's no real safe place in Gaza, or having concerns about the coronavirus.
DW's Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. Thank you. Let's speak now to Alexander Graf Lambsdorff, a member of the German Bundestag for the German business-friendly party, the FDP. He has also served as Vice President of the European Parliament. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us. Germany says Israel has a right to self-defense against Palestinian militants, but given the many civilian deaths in Gaza, would you say the Israeli attacks are proportionate?
Well, I think it's important to look at where this all started. This started with a barrage of missiles fired from Gaza indiscriminately at Israeli civilians. This is the starting point of the current conflict. The Israeli response was to be expected. It is measured in that the Israeli military usually calls ahead and warns inhabitants that strikes are imminent, gives them time to evacuate, but then sometimes, and you have pointed that out, there are civilian casualties for a very simple reason. Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, puts its missile launch pads in civilian areas, has its weapon stashes in civilian areas. And therefore, it's sometimes absolutely impossible to avoid these regrettable and sad and tragic events in which civilians lose their lives as well. But it's a measured response from Israel, very clearly, in the face of an unprecedented attack from Hamas.
OK, a measured response. Now, most EU foreign ministers have called for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but have failed to reach the unanimity that might give the EU leverage in peacemaking. How much influence can the EU really bring to stop this conflict?
The European Union has one very obstinate member these days. That's Hungary. That's the only country that has blocked a common resolution. But we have texts. I mean, there is no excuse for the European Union now to be inactive. If you look, for example, at the Council conclusions of 2016, January 2016, you will find a lot of elements that are a very good foundation to base Europe's work on in the region with the partners. It offers both sides, by the way, Israel and the Palestinians, a privileged partnership once they have achieved a peaceful settlement of the conflict. So I think Europe has an opportunity to do something. It's regrettable that they couldn't reach unanimity at this particular point in time now, but that's simply due to the fact that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, tries to block anything and everything that the European Union tries to do these days.
OK, now outside of Europe, the international community has been calling for peace negotiations. Who would you say would be most likely to lead them? The US seems slightly hesitant.
Yes, because President Biden is in his first term, and most American presidents have only taken up the mantle of trying to solve the problem in their second term. But I believe that the quartet should be reactivated: the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and Russia, and they should invite all the relevant actors from the region. The one problem that everybody has really is that it is impossible to find a legitimate interlocutor on the Palestinian side. Palestine has not had elections since 2006. President Abbas no longer enjoys democratic legitimacy. The Palestinians are split between the